Hello guys, how are you doing? I hope you're doing very nice today. So this video is going to be a bit different than usual, as it isn't video game related per se, but it is video games related. Anyways, I've seen quite a number of people in forums like PSX Place wanting to get into the whole PlayStation 3 world. So I thought I'd make a guide explaining the key differences between PlayStation 3 models and what to look for and what to avoid when buying a used or faulty PlayStation 3 console. So without further ado, welcome to the ultimate guide to buying used/faulty PlayStation 3 consoles. Before we get into our guide, many of you are wondering why the hell would I buy a PlayStation 3 in 2020? I mean, it's almost 2 generations old, and since the PlayStation 5 launch is on the horizon here in 2020, why spend money on an old console? So in order to answer this question, and without debating too much, I'll list off 3 reasons why you need a PlayStation 3 in 2020. PlayStation 3s are very cheap. During the life cycle of the console between 2006 and 2017, Sony shipped about 87.4 million systems to the public. Now, depending where you are from, you can easily find a used PlayStation 3 that is in good condition with controls and everything from anywhere between 50 to 120 bucks. And if you look a bit more and a bit longer, you can find them used for around $50 range. However, if you want to get it for even cheaper, you can buy a faulty one that is ripe for repair, and you would be spending about $20 to $30 for a PlayStation 3 system with repair costs. Also, availability for parts is huge. If anything does go faulty in your system, you can easily find parts online, and as there are tutorials for about everything concerning a PlayStation 3 on the internet, you can experiment all you want without and even if you do end up breaking something, it won't be such a waste because everything is so cheap and you can easily find a replacement for it. Games are also super cheap. On sites like eBay, you can find pretty much every PlayStation 3 title you want, and most of them range anywhere from $2 to $10. This is also excellent if you want to start a collection of video games, thus making a video game library on your own, since you can easily find used games that are in good condition. You can also buy game lots. These are like used video games that you buy in bulk, and therefore you're spending a lot less per game. You can get like a lot of 20 games for $20. And probably the best reason why you should get a PlayStation 3 is because of custom firmware. Now, if you aren't familiar with custom firmware is PS3's system firmware that is custom. All jokes aside, custom firmware allows a PlayStation 3 to run unsigned code. In other words, you can install and run custom programs on your system. These applications are often referred to as homebrew. Now, in order to install custom firmware on your console needs to be jailbroken first. In order to jailbreak your console, you need to flash the NOR or NAND chip, which allows the custom firmware to be installed. This is conventionally done with a hardware flasher. This is a bit complicated as it requires a disassembly of the console. However, thanks to the awesome work of many developers, today we have something called a PS3 exploit, and the PS3 exploit is a jailbreaking process of a compatible PlayStation 3 model, which doesn't require any disassembly, and all you need to pull it off is a USB drive and an internet connection, which is of course much simpler. So simple in fact that all you gotta do is watch a 30-minute guide on YouTube, and if you completed all the steps successfully, you would be up and running with a console that now accepts custom firmware of your choice. I'll link down my favorite PlayStation 3 exploit guide. I definitely recommend you watch it. It is incredibly detailed, and even if you've never touched a PlayStation 3 system before, you will be able to follow. It also explains all the repercussions you need to take in order to avoid any unnecessary side effects. Now, whether or not your stance on modding a console are good or positive or negative, it is always a good thing to have an option that you can either choose to have or choose not to have. My opinion is that owning a jailbroken console running custom firmware is such an advantage in 2020. It expands the usability of your console to a whole new level. If I were to explain the things you could do with the console running custom firmware, it would take me at least 2 videos. But just to prove my point, I list some of the things you can do with a jailbroken console. You could download PlayStation 3 games off the internet, put them on a storage device like a USB drive or an external hard drive, and using the most popular piece of homebrew, which is Multiman, you could either play them off directly off your storage device, or you can move it over to the internal hard drive of the system. You can play both PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games using emulators. You could also download PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 games off the internet, and then putting it onto the storage device and then playing it off your PlayStation 3. You can play all kinds of retro games which were ported to the PlayStation 3. To contrary belief, you can still go online even if you have a jailbroken console. All you need to do is spoof your firmware. Therefore, you could host modded lobbies for your friends. With Webman, you can stream movies and play games off your PC via internet. You can play all kind of movie formats. You can adjust the cooling system of the console, therefore you're improving the lifespan of the console. And I can go on and on like this, guys. I mean, if you want to find out more, I encourage you to Google a bit and find out all the awesome features that you have with the jailbroken console. I mean, there are plenty of them. Before we jump into discussing different PlayStation 3 models, it is worth mentioning that a lot of things that we're going to talk about today are limited to your location and what kind of market for consoles you have in your country. But since eBay is sort of like a universal market, I will be using that as a reference point. Sony has released 3 different versions of the PlayStation 3 during its life cycle. Chronologically going from left to right, we have the original PlayStation 3, or as it is commonly referred to as FAT, we have the PlayStation 3 Slim, and the PlayStation 3 Super Slim. All of these models will have their own pros and cons, which we're going to go over in this video, starting with the PlayStation 3 FAT. These bad boys are everywhere on the market, which means that you can find them pretty easily and you can find them for a very decent price. I will also be using a site called PS3 DevWiki for reference, which will be linked down in the description. This site is basically like a database for everything concerning a PS3 console, and here you can find things like compatibility between different parts and between different models, which will definitely come in handy later down the line. Now, the PS3 FAT has been manufactured between 2006 and 2009, so it goes without saying that these are really old systems. Now, there's nothing wrong with this statement, but hardware does degrade over time, especially hardware that has some major overlooked design issues. So, of the 3 Musketeers, this is probably the most unreliable one, which is a shame considering how easy it is to get your hands on one and how nostalgic the console really is. A good thing though is that all PS3 FATs can run custom firmware and are all exploitable through the method that we just mentioned earlier, which makes this console perfect for modding. So when it comes to buying used FATs, my general advice is to avoid these, because most of them that I have encountered are listed for anywhere between $60 to $90, and sometimes they go for even more. And for this kind of money, if you dig a bit, you can find a good deal and get yourself a PlayStation 3 for the exact same price, or you can add $10 to $20 extra for a Slim. And Slims are a lot more reliable when it comes to hardware durability. You could be saving yourself a lot of hassle. Now, I am aware that equipment also comes into the price, but since the games are pretty cheap and controllers could be found for around $10, this shouldn't be really a deciding denominator when it comes to the actual functionality of the console. So if you can find yourself a used FAT that is in good condition, you shouldn't pay more than $40 to $50 depending on the equipment. Also, there are a few things that you should keep in mind when it comes to inspecting a used FAT system. Look at the plastic housing and what kind of condition it is. I know this is kind of hard to see on an image, but things like big scratch marks and the bent plastic should be easy to spot. And if you do so, this could be an indicator that the console hasn't been taken care of properly and somebody has been messing around with it. Also, if the console hasn't been running any custom firmware and hasn't been jailbroken, and the fan starts spinning up really loudly after a few seconds in game, this could be a potential cooling problem. Also, pay attention to the warranty sticker on the side of the console and if it is still there. Not for the warranty's sake, of course, but if the sticker is still there, this could be an indicator that nobody has opened the console yet and messed around with it, which is a very good sign for you. Unfortunately, you can find these warranty stickers on AliExpress for 10 cents. Now, why am I saying all this? Well, with the PS3 FAT and its relatively cheap price, a lot of people that have console setting experience tend to buy these faulty and they do a sloppy fix and then they try to resell it to you. And then they're trying to hide some major flaws and majorly important details and are trying to make a quick flip on the console. So they could have just bought a YLOD console and they did a sloppy reflow and now they're trying to sell it to you, and if you end up buying that console, it might die on you after a few weeks of light use. So be patient and be careful. Check the background of the seller and what kind of feedback he or she has been getting from other people. So if other people had bad experience with the seller regarding consoles, maybe you should avoid the purchase no matter how good the deal is. Now this is a major problem with FATs. It is always a gamble when it comes to their actual functionality, so definitely be wary of that. Also, you should prefer FATs which are not jailbroken in the first place, mainly because it eliminates the possibility of the console being banned on PSN, and because people inflate the price because it is jailbroken. Now, if the seller is a regular guy who just wants to get rid of his old FAT, doing detective work is unnecessary, and I'm actually much more preferring buying console from normal people who haven't been messing around with their console before. Now we come into the faulty FATs. These are great if you're looking to get yourself a PS3 for a low price and if you want to get into console fixing. These are great consoles to start repairing, even if you have never had any experience with consoles. There are so many step-by-step teardown and reassemble videos for you to follow, and all kinds of faults are well documented on the internet for you to do your research on them. Now there could be a million things that could be wrong with a PS3 FAT, but I will categorize them for their most known faults so that you will be able to diagnose the PS3 system yourself when you see it, starting with the notorious yellow light of death. The symptoms of the yellow light of death is the iconic yellow light that flashes on the power LED indicator. It is accompanied by 3 beeps. The yellow D is an indicator for hardware failure inside the console, and while that could be anything inside the console, the most common causes of the yellow light of death are cracked solder joints between either the CPU or the GPU and the motherboard, or faulty NEC to TOKIN capacitors. Now, without getting too technical and dwelling too deep into the hardware architecture of the FAT, I will summarize and say that the most yellow D FATs are incredibly hard and risky to fix, since even if you do end up fixing these, at any point in time in the future the console could YLOD again. A popular method of fixing these is a reflow, but a reflow is only a potential fix if it is attempted on a console which hasn't been opened before and no fixes were attempted prior to yours, as a reflow is only effective a few times after it becomes completely useless. Also, a reflow is a very unreliable fix, as the console could last 2 years or it could last 2 days, there's just no telling. I will link down a detailed guide to reflowing chips in the description so that you can see this for yourself. A quick side note, do not put the motherboard inside of an oven, and do not point any running hairdryers onto the motherboard, as you could burn up a lot of important components. Another popular fix is a reball, but a reball service can get quite expensive, so we're gonna avoid these as well. The other fix that you could try is to replace the old NEC token capacitors with much better and newer tantalum capacitors. Now, as this fix requires some skill with the soldering iron and some additional equipment, your best bet is to buy these replacement capacitors yourself and then take them to your local repair shop and ask them to do this for you. The price of this service is, in most cases, is pretty decent. Now, in the description below, you can find a link that will take you to a full thread about changing out these capacitors. Now, if nothing, these YLOD consoles, and due to their affordable price, are great for finding spare parts. The second most common fault is a faulty or a broken Blu-ray drive. These kind of PS3s are the best PS3s for a possible fix, especially if you're a beginner, as you do not need any special equipment except a spare working Blu-ray drive. Now, a fix for this problem can be very easy and can be completed in a matter of minutes, but this kind of problem also possesses the nature to become very complicated, and the details of the problem make a huge difference in fixing. These consoles go for relatively cheap, and you can find one for less than $20. I will link down a full thread that I made on PSX Plays that explains everything you need to know about a faulty Blu-ray drive, and also all you need to know in order to fix a console with a broken Blu-ray drive. The next common fault is a faulty power supply. Common symptoms of a faulty power supply include that once the console is plugged into the power outlet, the console doesn't respond, nor is the LED power light on, or in some cases the PlayStation 3 might be having random shutdowns during use. Now, the fix could be as simple as swapping out the power supply, but if the power outage is caused by a short somewhere on the motherboard, then it gets a lot more complicated, as you would need a multimeter to find the short on the motherboard. Because of all of these complications, my warm-hearted advice is to avoid consoles like these unless you're willing to gamble. Moving on to the next common problem, we have a faulty HDMI port. Now, if the console doesn't show any output nor any signal once the HDMI cable is plugged into the console, the chances are that you have an HDMI issue are pretty likely. This is usually caused by either a faulty HDMI controller chip, or the actual port might have been pins in it, or the console could have been struck by lightning. And when it comes to fixing these, my advice to you is to take these into a console repair shop, as this isn't really easy to fix, and the price of this service should be pretty decent. I know for a fact that some of my local repair shops charge between $20 to $35 on an HDMI replacement, but this could vary a lot on your location. The next thing in the faulty category could be a faulty Wi-Fi to Bluetooth board. Since these aren't integrated onto the motherboard on FATs, all you have to do is swap a faulty board with a spare working one. Now we move on to the slims, and since these are much newer systems, that means that they're a lot more reliable than the fat, and its hardware is also a lot more durable. Now unfortunately, not all slims are able to be jailbroken. Now the only slims that can be jailbroken are the ones that have minimal downgradable firmware to 3.5, and the way that we can check this is by going to the PS3 DevWiki SKU model page. Now all models that have minimal downgradable firmware that's over 3.5 cannot run custom firmware, it cannot be exploited through the method, and if you try to do the method, you will brick your system. You can install something called PS3 HEN on these models of consoles, which isn't custom firmware, but it is pretty close. Now this leads me to present the absolute best PS3 to get in 2020, and that is any of the early 2000 series slims. These bad boys are pretty durable, they have all the same functionality as the fats, and they can all be jailbroken through the exploit method, which makes these, in my opinion, the best console to have if you want to explore the vast world of the PlayStation 3. When it comes to buying used slims, you should look for those that are between $60 to $100 depending on their equipment, and preferably they still have that warranty sticker that is now located on the bottom of the console. My general advice is that as long as the slim is in good condition and it is in adequate price range, there really isn't much that can go wrong with the purchase. The slims are pretty reliable and games are very cheap, and even if you have a later model slim, you can still put HEN on it and it will still be a very good buy. Now we come into the faulty slims, and many things that we talked about the faulty fats still apply on the faulty slims, with a few exceptions of course. For example, if you see a YLOD slim, my advice from experience is that you should avoid these, as in these cases the actual chip could be damaged, as slims aren't that prone to yellow light of death, so these are mainly for parts. Also, if you find a slim with a broken bootloader drive, if the console is an early 2000 model, then everything we talked about the fat applies on the slim, but if it's a 2500 or later model that cannot run custom firmware, you should mainly avoid these, because I'm not very sure that you can do the Remarry process with HEN, and to make matters worse, the bootloader drives in those later models all have integrated logic boards in them, so these are not swappable. Bluetooth and Wi-Fi boards are also different on the slim. They're all integrated onto the motherboard, so if the Wi-Fi or Bluetooth card is faulty, you will have to actually desolder the card and then resolder a working one, so that's a bit more complicated. And at last, we have the Super Slims, which are the newest consoles out of the bunch, which should mean that these are the most reliable ones because they are the newer systems. Unfortunately, none of the Super Slims are able to run custom firmware and are not exploitable through the method. They can run PlayStation 3 HEN though, so we're all good on that point. The used market for Super Slims is a bit pricey since these are relatively newer consoles, so people put them for more money, so these are going to be a bit more expensive. However, you shouldn't pay more than $100 no matter what PS3 it is. The 12GB models are a bit cheaper, but if you're going to be putting HEN on your system, you will need to get a new hard drive, so definitely keep that in mind. When it comes to faulty Super Slims, pretty much everything we talked about before applies on the Super Slim. The hardware architecture is a bit different on these, so it will be a bit trickier for you to repair these as not many faults are recorded online, and my advice to you is to go with a Slim rather than a Super Slim, in both used and faulty categories. But if you find a good deal on a Super Slim, there's no reason for you to hesitate to buy one. That being said, YLOD Super Slims are pretty rare. Also, since the bootloader drive is exposed on these, a faulty laser assembly is a common fault, but many people have reported that it's a very pain in the ass to change out the laser assembly, so my advice to you is to avoid these all throughout. So there we go guys, we finally made it all the way to the end. I'm very sorry for such a long video. There were just so many things that I wanted to talk about that I couldn't possibly fit it all into one small video. If you made it all the way to the end, a huge thank you, and maybe consider giving me a thumbs up, or maybe even subscribing to my channel for more content like this. If you like these kind of videos, please let me know down in the comment section. Maybe I will make more documentary based style videos like this. But yeah, this is all for now. This has been Xenon the Friend, and peace out.